All right. Well, I think as people are joining, we might start. So welcome everybody, and we might start first with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd just like to recognise all the lands on which we're meeting today, mainly in Tasmania, Lutruwita, but some people I think are joining from across Australia. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. Next slide. I'd just like to introduce the presenters today. So I'm Michelle Palisire. I'm a physiotherapist here at the University of Tasmania and an academic. We have Associate Professor Jane Cartwright, who's a neurologist and specialist in Parkinson's disease. And today we're really fortunate to have Associate Professor Jade Cartwright, who is a speech pathologist and researcher. She's at the School of Health and Sciences at the University of Tasmania. Jade's a really strong advocate for improving access to speech pathology, allied health and rehabilitation focused services for people with progressive neurological conditions, including Parkinson's disease. And the webinar today will explore some common speech and communication changes associated with Parkinson's disease and share some ideas and strategies to respond proactively and optimise communication, participation and success. If you have any questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll answer them hopefully at the end, as many as we can. So once again, I'm really pleased to see you. This is the first webinar of the Tasmanian Parkinson's Project. Some of you may have come to the symposium earlier on, and we're really hoping that through education and research here at the University of Tasmania, we can improve the lives of people living with Parkinson's disease. So I'll switch over to Jade now to start the presentation. Thanks, Jade.
So I'll just jump in there. I'll just jump in there first. Hello, everyone. I'm Jane. I'm a local neurologist and one of the co-leads of this Tasmanian Parkinson's project. And as Michelle just explained, we're going to be doing lots of these webinars over the next year or two, we hope, probably doing one about every 2 months. So thank you for joining us on the first one. Most of today will be Jade Cartwright talking about speech and communication matters with Parkinson's. But first of all, I just wanted to give you a quick update on what the Tasmania Parkinson's Project is. I'm aware that many of you will have come to our symposium in February, but some won't. And we were particularly keen for people that have not yet signed up for the Parkinson's Project to do so. It's open to any adult across Australia, whether you have Parkinson's or not. So as many of you will know, Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing neurological condition worldwide. There's been a doubling of prevalence in the last 25 years. And Parkinson's is far more common than many people realise, at least 1% of those over the age of 60. And important to say, it's not just people that are older, there's also young people with Parkinson's too. We think there's about 3,000 people in Tasmania with Parkinson's, but we're not entirely sure. That's part of the project, trying to work out who has it, and at least 200,000 across Australia. So it's a super common condition. And I think we're all agreed we need to do more research in this area. So what is the Tasmania Parkinson's Project? It's really new. We just started this in February. And we would love you to join up. All you have to do is put that the address there, parkinsons.utas.edu.au, into your browser. It will literally take 2 minutes to join, just to give us your email address so that we can let you know about all the other opportunities that are coming up as part of this project. And on the next couple of slides, I'll just show you what the project's going to involve. So the nice thing about this project is that most of it can just be done from the comfort of your own home. So first of all, we'll be sending you some questionnaires to fill out on your computer. And we're also going to send you a computer test called TAS test, or Tasmanian test. And you might have seen this on the local news or the radio. We get people to tap their fingers as fast as they can, and the computer measures the speed of it. We also get people to do some other tests to do with speech and thinking and memory tests. So basically, it's all done from home through your own computer. And what we're really trying to do there is find out who across Australia has Parkinson's, who doesn't, so that we can categorise people and start to look for patterns of differences. And really through those tests that will be done at home, we can then start to, as I say, put people in different groups so we can get people involved in different parts of the research. Some of the research will involve sending you kits where we can test your smell, or you wear a little watch to measure your sleep-wake cycle. And then we will also invite a smaller group to come into the university to do some much more detailed movement assessments. So you don't have to take part in all of that. If you just want to do the bits online at home, that's totally fine. So it's one of those studies where you can pick which parts you're interested in. And as I say, tell everyone about it. We're getting as many people to sign up as possible. We're aiming for about 5,000 in total. And so far we have almost 1,500 in just a couple of months. So we're getting lots of enthusiasm about this study, and we'd love you to be part of it too. All right, that's enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to Jade now, who's going to tell you much more about communication within Parkinson's. Thank you, Jade.
Thanks so much, Jane. It's my absolute pleasure to be presenting today on a topic that's very close to my heart. Sorry, losing my voice already. I've dedicated much of my career as a speech pathologist to working alongside people with progressive neurological conditions, including Parkinson's and dementia, and really helping to find solutions to support connection and social engagement. So while I have expertise to offer, I'm not the expert, and I really want to acknowledge that it's people living with Parkinson's who really have the deepest knowledge and understanding of the communication challenges that can be experienced and of the sorts of solutions that really work best. So I'm going to share a range of strategies, supports, ideas today, but I'd also would really love if you feel comfortable sharing your own strategies and supports and tips as well using the Q&A function. So if we do have some come through, we will be able to share those and disseminate them to the group at the end of today's event. So in the presentation today, we will be exploring communication. We'll look at the impact of Parkinson's on communication. We'll look at some different practical strategies and supports, and through doing that, we will explore the speech pathology role in supporting people with Parkinson's, and we'll finish with some time for questions and answers at the end. So communication does play such a central role in our daily lives. It has been described as the currency of our relationships, and it allows us to connect, to share our opinions, to have influence, to engage socially. In fact, just about every activity of daily living involves communication in some way. Our ability to communicate, however, is something that we all take for granted until it is disrupted by something like Parkinson's. And we don't often stop to think about how complex the act of communicating actually is. So we'll spend a few moments looking at what communication actually involves. So understanding this process of communication can help to identify where things are breaking down or going wrong, and the sorts of strategies and supports that might be able to help. So we will focus on spoken communication today, which is really the act of transforming our thoughts into words. And this does involve three main steps. So first, we have to conceptualize or plan the idea or message that we want to communicate or convey. So this might be an opinion we want to express, or a story that we want to share, or it might be a question that we want to ask. So the idea needs to be organized and it needs to be sequenced, deciding, for example, how much detail we want to convey or what points we really want to emphasize or make clear. So this planning takes a lot of conscious attention, and it is cognitively demanding. So it taps into both our short-term and also our longer-term memories. Once we've planned the message, we then have to retrieve the words, the sentence structures, and the sounds that allow us to convey that message. So this involves retrieving words from our own mental dictionary, which is a store of all of the words that we know. Finally, we activate the muscles of speech, including our lips, our tongue, our voice box, our lungs, to articulate the message and into spoken communication. All the while, we are listening to ourselves, ensuring that what we do say hits the mark, that it's clear, and that it's understood by our listener. So this self-monitoring process helps us to identify when a repair or clarification might be needed. So we know that Parkinson's can impact these processes, making communication more challenging. In fact, 90% of people with Parkinson's do experience changes in communication of some kind. A recent study by Swales and colleagues surveyed 78 people living with Parkinson's, and 97% of those people had noticed some changes in their ability to communicate. So in this study, they explored the most common challenges that people experience. And in the presentation today, we're going to work through the top 5 challenges that were identified. And you'll see that they do span all of these 3 stages of communication. So the most common challenges that were described were a soft voice, closely followed by a reduction in speech clarity, so how easy speech is to be understood. And this was often described as a mumbling quality. So these changes reflect the changes in speech itself at the level of articulation. One participant in this study described that taxi drivers don't hear them anymore, and many noted that frequent requests for repetition are one of the frustrating changes that they have experienced. Next was difficulty thinking of words. So this was another common challenge experienced by 77% of people with Parkinson's. Next, we have taking longer to plan messages and difficulty contributing to conversation, experienced by more than 50% of the participants. So all of these changes were associated with social and participation impacts. They can mean that people with Parkinson's start to sit back more in conversation or to adopt more of a listener role. It might also mean that people start to avoid social events or activities where communication is really required. The people with Parkinson's also described that people might start speaking over them in conversation or not seeking their opinion as much in conversation. And they might start directing questions to their spouse or to a family member instead. So this really starts to change the dynamics of conversation and how satisfying and enjoyable conversations are. And as a speech pathologist, these are things that we really want to prevent from happening. And we really want to work in close partnership with you to find strategies and supports to put in place to help make conversations more enjoyable. And this really involves problem solving around the challenges or the barriers that you experience and developing a toolbox of communication strategies that you can readily draw upon in your everyday conversations. So every person with Parkinson's will have their own unique set of strategies, and what's in your toolbox will need to evolve and change over time. This is as your Parkinson's changes, but also as you change. So as you explore new interests or as new social opportunities or occasions arise. So today we're going to explore some different strategies that map to these top challenges, but it's important to note that there are many more strategies out there. So there is so much that we can do to help, and the key is really tailoring and personalising those strategies to what you need at a particular point in time. Some of the strategies that we look at will be for you, so for the person with Parkinson's disease, and some of them will be for the communication partner. And it's really important that we highlight that communication is always collaborative and it's always done in partnership. So it's not just about the person with Parkinson's adjusting and accommodating their communication. We all have a really important role to play. So let's start by looking at some practical ways to respond if your voice is soft or if you're experiencing a reduction in the clarity of your speech. So these changes in voice and speech are examples of motor or movement symptoms of Parkinson's. So it is here where you may find you're having to repeat yourself more in conversation so that the message is successfully understood. The changes in speech and in voice in part relate to the bradykinesia, so the slowness of movement in Parkinson's, as well as the rigidity that can be seen in the muscles that we use to speak. But it does also relate to the underscaling of movement, which is another key feature of Parkinson's, and it relates to changes happening in the basal ganglia of the brain. This underscaling also relates to difficulties with self-monitoring and sensory changes that do occur in Parkinson's. So people with Parkinson's often perceive their voice to be much louder and their speech to be clearer than it actually is. But we know in the early stages of Parkinson's, at least, it's possible to compensate for this underscaling, and people can speak louder and they can speak clearer with effort. So essentially, this involves turning speech into a more conscious action, and we are almost bypassing the basal ganglia to do this. So if we speak louder and speak clearer with intention, then we can improve the clarity and how successful or effective speech is. So one of the ways we can do this is by thinking loud when we're speaking. So this sets the intention of loud speech and it allocates greater attention to your speech. Practice is needed, though, to really lay down this new, more intentional way of speaking. It is changing your more habitual or automatic way of speaking, and that does take practice and repetition. So LSVT Loud is the most evidence-based therapy that can train this Think Loud principle. It is a really intensive program that's delivered by a certified speech pathologist, and it improves breath support and also use of a safe technique to project and to increase that effort, to increase volume without causing any kind of strain or discomfort in the throat or in the voice box itself. And then with intensive practice, you can see a real functional impact. So for example, a man with Parkinson's was working as a volunteer, training seniors to use computers. However, his students were really struggling to hear what he was saying. He participated in LSVT to build up his vocal strength and to use the Think Loud strategy. And as a result, he was able to fulfill his volunteer role more successfully. So we really aim for those sorts of functional impacts through interventions like this. Speak Out is similar, although a slightly less intensive program. It focuses on speaking with intent and really thinking about projecting the voice out across the room and ensuring that sounds are articulated clearly. The Speak Out program does transition into group sessions, which are called the Loud Crowd, which provides the opportunity to support practice using this new way of speaking in a more social context. Groups play a really important role in keeping your speech at its optimal level. They're so important. So this could be kind of joining a choir like Parkinson. It could be joining a drama club. It could be joining a bird watching group. It's anything that requires you to use your loud and intentional voice in a more social, fun, supportive setting. So even reading poetry aloud or things like that can provide great opportunities to practice using your loud, intentional voice. It is really important to put yourself in situations where you are required to interact and to speak with others, to maintain your skills and to enjoy those sorts of social interactions. It is important to choose activities that you really enjoy and to find environments where you feel comfortable and supported in. This really makes practice more fun and more sustainable, and it's really important for just holistic health and well-being as well. External cues can also be really helpful for cueing a loud voice. So there are apps that you can have on your phone or on an iPad that will show you how loudly you are speaking and whether you are getting your speech within this green target zone. So these apps provide an external cue for when that increased effort or where that intentional voice is needed, activating that think loud strategy. So external cues can be another great way to help you bypass that basal ganglia and to compensate for that underscaling of movement. To also address a soft voice and that reduced clarity of speech, we should also really think about creating an ideal communication environment. And this is where we as communication partners have a really important role to play. So some of the practical strategies here are things like reducing background noise and finding a quieter place for conversations. So this might include thinking about where you sit in a cafe, so finding a quiet corner of the cafe or sitting away from noisy speakers or from loud activity or a loud group, or going to the cafe when you know it's going to be a little bit quieter, or when you know that your speech is going to be at its best. It's important to always try and sit face to face where possible and in close proximity to help your speech be understood. And we always encourage to make the topic of conversation clear and to remember to use what we call multimodal communication or all forms of communication. So this might be writing some words down, it might be using gesture to support your communication, using any of the tools you need to help you get the message across. As a communication partner, it's really important that we always let the person with Parkinson's know if we haven't understood their message clearly. We should never pretend that we have, because the person will always know. So it's one of the important cues that we need to give when we're having conversations. This really highlights and reminds us that communication is always collaborative and it's always done in partnership. So the environment and our skills as communication partners will have a significant impact on how successful communication is. And again, if you have your own tips or ideas for creating communication environments, it would be lovely to share them. So the next challenge is difficulty thinking of words. So this is an example of a non-motor symptom of Parkinson's, and it's also very common. So this is really the phenomenon of having a word on the tip of your tongue. So where you know what you want to say, but you can't quite get that exact word to express your message. So this could be the name of a person, it could be the name of a place, it could be the name of a movie that you watched recently. This happens to all of us from time to time, but for people with Parkinson's, it can happen more frequently. So here, one of the main strategies that we recommend if people are having trouble finding words is really describing the word and giving more clues. So it's a bit like playing charades or 20 questions, but we would give as many clues or features of the word as possible to help you find the word that you're looking for, or to help your communication partner know the word that you're wanting to find or say. So we can describe what this word looks like, where we would find it, what we would do with it, what we associate it with, what memories we might find that it evokes for us. So we're explaining and describing as many features of the word as we can. And again, working with a speech pathologist, we can look to tailor these strategies to the sorts of difficulties that you're experiencing. There are, again, some apps on an iPad or an iPhone that can support this sort of practice. And there are activities that get you to name pictures, that get you to think of words in different categories, to describe objects or actions. And again, these can be tailored and set up to meet your individual needs. And these sorts of word games and activities really function as a form of cognitive stimulation. So they can help to keep your mind active, similar to other word games, to crosswords, even your daily Wordle. So they're things that keep your mind active, and this is really important. If word findings are prominent, then we can also look at what we call AAC aids, or communication books or wallets or cards that can help put the words that you need into the environment. So it might provide a bit of a backup system if the words aren't coming easily. So some people find these sorts of strategies really helpful, others don't. Again, it's finding the tools that work best for you. So next we come to the more cognitive communication challenges associated with Parkinson's, and this can include things like taking more time to plan ideas. So cognitive changes like these can mean that people might lose the thread of conversation, and they often describe things like, once I finally plan what I want to say, the conversation has already moved on. So it makes it harder to contribute to the conversation. So not everyone experiences these difficulties, but when they are present, they can really impact somebody's confidence to join in, but it's so important that you continue to do so. So I worked with a man with Parkinson's for a long time who was experiencing these types of difficulties. He was a writer, he had amazing general knowledge and loved conversations with his children, and in particular his son-in-law. They would talk about all sorts of topics, so travel and holidays and history. But because of the changes in communication, he was starting to avoid these sorts of conversations. His son-in-law really wanted to continue them, so we worked together to look at some strategies and some ways to make these conversations easier and to really build his confidence. And we were able to find some strategies to help these conversations continue for longer. So here, one of the main strategies that we do often explore is time. So having sufficient time to plan and to share your thoughts before the conversation moves on, and really letting your communication partners know that you do need that extra time, and that a pause or a delay in the conversation doesn't mean that you don't have something to contribute or say. So sometimes having a hand signal, like something like lifting your hand, where you can just hold the floor and indicate that you just need a bit more time to gather your thoughts, and to give you the time that you need. Another strategy that can be helpful is offline planning. And this is really taking the time in advance to think about what information you might need, what words you might require, what it is that you want to say. So this can include things like writing down the questions that you want to ask your doctor ahead of an appointment. It might mean just sitting down to plan a phone call to your bank or to make an appointment before you do so, or even planning for a social conversation with a friend. Having done some of this planning and kind of the organisation beforehand can mean that it's less cognitively demanding to be planning and thinking of your ideas in the moment. So it can help your thoughts and your words to come more easily. It can also be helpful to practice organising your thoughts and sharing your opinions and stories. And there are also therapy approaches out there that speech pathologists can use that really practice this aspect of communication. So our team at UTAS is developing an intervention called Nadia, which uses things like these mind maps to help practice telling stories and sharing opinions, and really building that confidence to continue contributing to conversation. So this is a technique that I've used kind of informally with people with Parkinson's before, and we are starting to explore options to test this more formally through research and projects. Originally, this technique was designed for use with people who have communication difficulties following stroke, but we can really see its appeal for people with other conditions or other communication needs as well. Conversation partner training is also really important. So this really notes the dynamic interplay that happens between the speaker with Parkinson's and their listener. And in this sort of approach, a speech pathologist might video you having a conversation with a family member, and you would watch that video back together and explore what's going really well and where perhaps the barriers or the communication challenges might be. So this allows us to really tailor strategies and adjustments to conversations to make them more successful and more enjoyable. Again, this might be simple things like giving more time or not jumping in too quickly, but we can just make those tweaks to make the conversation more successful. There are some fantastic new programs that are being developed in this area. And some are in Australia. So I know Naomi Cox and colleagues at Curtin University in WA are looking at developing a communication partner training program. And there's also work underway in the UK by the Better Conversations team. So it will be really exciting to see new programs, new developments for people with Parkinson's in the future. And we can link you with these resources if you are interested. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of a toolbox of strategies, and we can explore some of these more in the discussion component of our presentation time today. If you are seeking more information and further ideas, and if you are looking for supports for your communication, I'm also aware of a fabulous website that is being developed by Naomi Cox and her team in WA. It's going to be sharing a range of different communication strategies and tips that people with Parkinson's themselves have found really beneficial. So these are things that they've discovered in their everyday conversations. The website is still under development, but it is one that you can register to this project, and you are able to view the website and also provide some feedback to support the ongoing development of the tool. So it's a great opportunity to build on your understanding and your awareness of kind of the really wide range of strategies that are available. So it's really important, I guess, to acknowledge that our role as speech pathologists is just one small part of the broader support team. I really love this model that has been developed by Bas Bloom and colleagues, where the person with Parkinson's and their family is at the centre of the model, and the support team is then revolving around you. It really helps to have a speech pathologist in your inner circle, along with other allied health professionals, really working alongside you to help you adapt and help you come up with new strategies as things change. So we can help you come up with new communication strategies for your toolbox, and to look for ways to help you stay connected with your family and friends. When we look at a model or an image like this, it also reminds us that things like sleep, like exercise, like good food are all going to contribute to your health and well-being, and as a result will also contribute to your communication. So it's important to take that holistic view and to remember how interconnected everything is, and a team approach is so important. So locally in Tasmania, we are starting to explore ways to improve access to speech pathology services for people with Parkinson's. We know that many people do successfully access services, but we also know that many people are also missing out. We currently have a group of our graduating speech pathology students who are working with Parkinson's Tasmania to explore some solutions. So to find ways that we can link people with Parkinson's in a more timely and effective way with speech pathology and other allied health services. So we are really looking forward to seeing what solutions, what strategies we can come up with. We'd also love to hear from you, your ideas about how we can make this possible and how we can ensure that you are linked with services in a more timely way. This is so important because we know that communication matters, and we absolutely know that your voice needs to be heard. So thank you. That kind of brings me to the end of the formal presentation, and then we were hoping to have some time for questions and just conversation at the end. So thank you, Michelle and Jane.
Thank you so much, Jade. That was so interesting, and it's so good to be able to think of communication in not just the loudness of voice, but also things like planning what to say, being able to find the right words, and allowing people to have enough time to respond, and how important it is just not for the person but everybody else to be able to work together to enable that communication. So that was fantastic. I've just one comment. Thank you, Jade. Fantastic. There are no questions there at the moment. So if anyone does have a question, please put it in. So I might start. So how early should someone see a speech pathologist? Are there things that, someone can do as soon as they're diagnosed? Have you got any recommendations?
I think that early intervention is always so important, and I think that allows us to work in a more preventative and a more proactive way. So there is good evidence to support, that early contact with a speech pathologist. Always we will be tailoring what we recommend to what you need. So at that early point, it might be just helping you to understand what the speech pathology role is, what options are available. Often we would, really talk to you about whether, what are the functional impacts that you're having or noticing day to day, so we can start coming up with some creative strategies and solutions. And then you, of course, know that we're there if you need us in the future as things do change. And it's that kind of longevity of that relationship that I think is really important too. There are some interventions that are being used in a preventative way. So one that I didn't talk about in I guess the fairly quick overview this afternoon is an approach called EMST, or expiratory muscle strength training, that is being used more in the early stages of Parkinson's to help maintain some of that respiratory breath support to support a loud voice. So I think there's more interest in interventions and things we can be doing early. I think most importantly, it's continuing to talk, that kind of use it or lose it principle, that we want to stay engaged, we want to continue using our communication.
So good. And if you don't like singing, then talking loudly is okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Jane, do you want to answer maybe some of those questions? Maybe you might be able to answer some of those questions about the link between stroke and Parkinson's.
Yeah, so there's a question here from Heather about, is it an established link between stroke and Parkinson's? And I think the short answer would be that there isn't usually a link between stroke and Parkinson's. Parkinson's is caused by a gradual degeneration of brain cells that contain dopamine, not really caused by a stroke, which is a blocked blood vessel in most cases, or it can be a burst blood vessel. However, there are a few people that have lots of little strokes, and it can look quite similar to Parkinson's, so people's walking slows down. So I hope that answers your question, Heather, that normally there isn't a direct link there. There's another comment here from Sally saying that she likes the Baz Bloom model, and asking whether we should add in music therapists into that as well. Don't know if you want to comment on that, Jade?
Yeah, absolutely. I think music therapists play such an important role as part of this broad holistic team. I know some speech pathologists that have done wonderful work with music therapists as well. So I think that collaborative work and looking at how we can complement each other's skill set is so important. And I think for people who do love singing, it's such a great way for supporting speech and voice function, but also just that social connection and the fun and enjoyment that's so important for us day to day.
Thanks, Jade. There's another question here about, do you know what some of the most useful apps are?
Yeah, and I would be happy. We are going to kind of answer these questions in a little bit more detail and have them available on the website. So I can certainly pull together some links of some of the useful apps. It does kind of depend on the nature of the difficulty. And I think that was kind of the model that I started with. So if it's something to help speech versus something to help kind of the planning of ideas, we would have different apps for different purposes, but we could certainly put up a selection that you could have a look at. Some of them are free, some of them have a small fee, some of them are more expensive. So that can be a bit of a factor as well. And again, there are apps that really support that cognitive stimulation and keeping your mind active versus the ones like the sound level meter, which provides that external cue to help get that loud voice in conversation. So yeah, I can definitely follow that one up with some further ideas.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Jade. There's a really important question here about how do people actually access a speech pathologist?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and one that I was hoping that would come up. In Australia, through the Speech Pathology Australia website, there is a Find a Speech Pathologist search function. So that again is a link that we can include in our follow-up material. So that is often a good place to start, just to see if there is a speech pathologist in your area. Talking to your GP or to your neurologist is also a good way to do it, and see if they know of speech pathologists in your local area again. Some public hospitals, if there's an outpatient service, will provide good services for people with Parkinson's, and otherwise people are, I guess, accessing private services as well. And there are certainly speech pathologists working around Australia who have a particular interest in Parkinson's. And I think there was another question around how do we help people build their support networks? And I think that's through community, and I think it's through events like this where we kind of all need to become connectors, and we all need to be, I guess, playing a really active role in building this network of support. So sometimes it is word of mouth. Sometimes calling the local university can be a really good strategy to find out whether there are university clinics running or research projects that might allow you to get a little burst of therapy of some kind as well. So there's lots of different strategies. I guess if that question was more around funding and payment, so for people under the age of 65, NDIS funding can support access to speech pathology. Sometimes talking to your GP about chronic disease management plans can facilitate initial access. So there are different mechanisms for supporting that access too. But again, talking to your GP, talking to your neurologist would be a good place to start.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jade. And I think Chris has said the University of the Third Age has some singing groups in poetry and singing, which is great. I don't know if you know of any specific Parkinson's singing groups that exist at all.
So Parkinson is a program that runs in different places around Australia too. So that's certainly one to look out for. But yeah, I think those general groups in the community are fantastic too. And I think part of our role is raising awareness of Parkinson's in the community and making sure that those groups that do run are inclusive and are accessible for people with different support needs or for different communication needs as well. So I think that's another part of what we would love a network like this to kind of do, is to start developing a bit of an inventory of all of the different groups that are out there. So again, we can connect you with those opportunities more easily.
Yes, because I think some of them are online, aren't they? So they are
Yeah,
accessible wherever you live, which is
yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely.
And there's an interesting question here, Jade, about whether specific types of dementia show really similar communication signs to those that you see in people with Parkinson's. So I think that's round, are these very specific to Parkinson's, or can you see it in other disorders as well?
Yeah, I think when we look at the kind of the most common difficulties and the nature of the difficulties, you will see differences across different diagnoses. So somebody with an Alzheimer's disease, for example, would present differently, but how they describe their changes or the sorts of supports that help might actually be quite similar. So there'll definitely be overlap, there'll definitely be similarities. Something like word finding difficulties we see universally across so many different conditions, but there would always be some unique, some particular things that would be more characteristic of Parkinson's versus another type of dementia. And I guess that's again where linking in with allied health professionals or within that broader team is that we can help tease that apart and help to look at the nature of a person's difficulties and what sort of support strategies would be needed. But yeah, that's a great question.
Thanks. There's another one here that's interesting. What if someone has hearing problems as well as difficulty with communication? Have you got some ideas or strategies and how to facilitate conversation there?
Yeah, I mean, this goes both ways. It can be the hearing difficulties of the person with Parkinson's speaking, but if their communication partners have a hearing difficulty, then that adds another layer of complexities. When your voice is soft and then your listener's got a hearing impairment, it disrupts that dynamic of conversation even more. So I guess trying to augment that hearing loss is important. So going to see an audiologist and seeing whether a hearing aid or some sort of amplification might help would be a really important step. But you could also look at some of those external cues. So if you're not picking up on how loud your speech is, then that's where the external sound level meter that's giving you that index could really be helpful. And again, it's where that communication partner role might be really important, where they might provide some of the feedback and help with that self-monitoring if you're not able to monitor your own speech and how clear it is. So yeah, it definitely adds another complexity, but one that again, we would be able to problem solve around and give you some good strategies to help navigate that.
And do people ever use like talking into something that then increases the volume? Is there other technology that can be used?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can use speech amplifiers. So where it is just like having a little microphone, you might hook it onto the belt of your jeans, or and then it would just have a little microphone that you speak into, and that will amplify your voice just like we would use a microphone to give a big public lecture. So there is technology like that where you can amplify and again compensate for that soft voice. So often we would recommend trialing something like an LSVT program first and seeing if you can achieve that louder voice through intention and effort. But if not, then we can absolutely look for those other compensatory strategies.
That's great. And someone said, are there any other strategies or exercises that can be used in the early stages? So you've mentioned the singing and the LSVT program. Are there any others that people should consider in that early stage?
I think again, it is just continuing to use your speech. So, anything. So it might be reading aloud from the newspaper, or, again, reading poetry aloud, or making that effort to go along to a social conversation, to a social event and really joining in with the conversation. So I think using your speech as much as possible. But I think even from the early stages, just practicing that speaking with intention, practice, having that conscious attention to your speech. The earlier we start doing that, then it's going to become more automatic, and it will be there as a strategy when you do need it in a conversation. So I think, yeah, again, starting early, really thinking about how you're using your speech day to day, yeah, is really important.
That sounds so important, because I think it sounds like there is the problems that can happen from having Parkinson's disease, but then also people don't want to go out as much. And so there's that, you know, deconditioning, I suppose, that you lose. So it sounds like from both ends, people need to try and stay socially engaged as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think we're done all the questions, if no one else has any. Oh, one more. Is ET a form of PD and could also benefit from these strategies, or another condition requiring different tools? Is that essential tremor, Jane? Is that ET?
Yeah, normally. I mean, I can try and answer that if you like, Jade.
Yes, thank you. No, you go.
So, essential tremor, used to be called benign essential tremor, is a different condition to Parkinson's disease. In that people tend to get shaky hands, both sides, and they may get a shaky voice. It does slightly progress over decades, but it is a different condition to Parkinson's, although it can be muddled up because both can have the tremors. So I don't know, Jade, if you recommend speech pathology for a tremulous voice with an essential tremor.
Yeah, often we would recommend having an ENT evaluation first, so where a scope would be passed just to have a look down at how your vocal folds are working. And there are speech pathologists who specialise in voice and who would be able to explore some strategies to help. It can again be a really important part of a plan if that's the difficulty. Sorry, my internet's unstable. I don't know if it just cut out then.
No, I think we've got most of that. Thank you, Jade. And I mean, I think just by the number of questions that you've had, it shows how important this issue is, how many questions people have. And I think there's also a really positive message here. One thing that you said that stuck in my mind is that people don't realise they're speaking quietly, but by using the strategies you've mentioned, they are able to speak loud, and it's just consciously sort of paying attention to that. And I think that's a really positive message. A nice one to end on. Michelle, I don't know if you want to just mention other webinars that we might be planning later this year as part of the Tasmanian Parkinson's Project. We've got lots of things planned, haven't we?
We sure have, Jane. So we're going to have one on exercise and Parkinson's on, I think it's June the 17th. Have I got that right? So we'll pop that up on the Tasmanian Parkinson's Project website, and also send it out an email to everybody who's joined today. So that should be a good one to come and do some more positive things for Parkinson's.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and particularly thank you to Jade for sharing all her expertise with us. I've certainly learned a lot today, and I'm sure everyone else has. So thank you, everybody, for joining us online, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our other webinars later this year. Thank you.
Thanks so much.